Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Innovation Space webinar, Innovation in Time of Crisis, How to Shift Your Mindset and Pursue Opportunity. Thank you for taking time out and being here today. My name is Sandra Nešić. I'm a lead business designer, innovation manager at ICT Hub, and I'll be your host for this webinar. So in line with what we do, empowering innovation, for companies, we support strategic approach to innovation with formulating and implementing innovation strategy, supporting the strategic guidance to innovation efforts, helping develop and build around new value propositions and business model innovation and innovation culture that is needed to support all of that. We also gather and grow a community of entrepreneurs and innovators and support innovation ecosystem throughout the region. And in line with all of that, we have started these webinars as a space where we can share, learn, and connect. So I invite you to say hello and maybe introduce yourself in the chat section of this webinar. And I have a special and a dear guest with us today. You maybe remember him for his inspirational keynote talk at our Corporate Innovation Conference. His name is Horvath. He speaks, advises, and as a partner in Lumen, he consults and trains executives and their workforce in immersive transformational experiences, enabling them not just to be ready for the future, but to actively create it. So our agenda for today is first, let's say 40 minutes, it will be a presentation delivered by Philip around very important topic. And that is what we need now as leader necessary to create this new tomorrow and how to go around it. Afterwards, we will have a Q&A session. At the end of the webinar, we'll take your questions throughout the webinar. In the right-hand side of the screen, you have Q&A section, so you can just pop your question. And if you miss anything or you want to go over everything we talked and discussed about, you can just go over this video, which will be available at our eHub e-learning platform within the section of online meetups, or at our YouTube channel, ICT Hub. So now I'll stop my screen and say hello live like this in person to all of our participants and welcome Philip. Philip, thank you again for joining us, for being here today with us and taking your time. Philip is in Berlin right now, and we're really looking forward to hear some of your thoughts on this new situation and the situation we're all in and how that is reflecting us as leaders and innovation in general. Philip, welcome.
Thank you so much, and super excited to be here and meet some of you virtually again at least. It was such a pleasure to be at your conference last year, and I love what you guys put up and the people that you brought together for it. So I'm excited to be sharing with you again today. Can you all see my screen? Did that work?
Yes.
Beautiful, beautiful. Cool, then we'll go right into it because I want to go fast through this so that we have time for Q&A, and we'll have a little bit of interaction in a moment as well. But just to get started, you guys already talked about the welcome, and I think you all spend enough time in Zoom meetings these days. We don't need to go deep into this. So a little bit of the agenda. I'm going to go talk a little bit about the current moment, stress in your limbic system, because they really relate to the situation. Look into a couple of key questions and mindsets for leaders and how you can approach the immediate situation. Scanning for some trends and opportunities. We will do that together. And then really look into what to do next. And as I said, I'm going to save some time for the end so we can specifically talk about what's important and in front for you right now. So as Sandra already mentioned, the good news is we're all in this together. This is a planetary thing. This doesn't matter what country you're from, what gender you have, what company you work for, big, tall, small, none of that matters. This is something that really brings us together as humans, and it's scary. And what we're seeing in this new situation is that virtual or mixed has become the new norm. and it requires new capacities, similar to the innovation capacities like self-reliance and self-organization and self-regulation. These things are now more important than ever. And while last year I talked to people about virtual and how virtual is coming, and they said, oh, it's in the future, now the future has gone mainstream. And at the moment, pretty much any country that I know, if you look at the stats, nearly as many people as are possible to work at home are actually working from home right now. And many people are considering that to be the new normal in many ways. I read a statistic just now that 73% of all CFOs are actually looking into how they can reduce their office space now, because obviously that's a huge cost item for many people in terms of actually having physical space. And we'll see that offices in general are going to change. What it's also done is that it's accelerated everything. Right? We've just hit this acceleration pad in the last few months, and while future last year was still future, now it's already today. And that also requires way more innovation, and not just innovation in the sense of building the new, right? Because in the past, innovation has really been for future problems, but it's now moving to the core, right? Moving to today's problems, moving and becoming everybody's job. Right? So it's not just, this thing that you do in order to create a new product or a new business for potential new markets, but it's essentially used now in the same innovation tools that you guys have been learning from ICT Hub and similar companies. Exactly the same tools are now required in the core. Another thing we're seeing, and that's an interesting one, is that businesses that have actually invested in their people and mindset over the last years are thriving in comparison to others. But if you look at, for example, Microsoft did a great job in introducing growth mindset, which I'll talk about in a moment. And it's actually allowed them to be much more adaptive in the situation than some of their competitors. So mindset is a key thing because we live in this new world. Right? And you've probably by now all heard the term VUCA. Last year was also a bit of an esoteric term. It's originally a military term, and it stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. Exactly what we're facing now. Right? Everything is more volatile, changes from day to day. There's way more uncertainty in spite of the fact that we have way more data than ever. Right? Our news are actually overwhelming, and I don't know about you. If I go to my LinkedIn feed at this point, I'm actually starting to be a little bit tired of all the amazing information I could be reading, all the webinars I could go to. So I really appreciate that you're here. And of course, the world's become much more complex because we're seeing this international dependence. We're seeing that something in China actually can create something in America, and something in America creates something in Australia. We're seeing this interconnectedness now, and it's making everything more complex. And finally, the ambiguity around it all, right? Is it overhyped? Are we too afraid of this virus, or are we underestimating what's going on? We don't really know, right? And so there's a lot of VUCA going on. And what VUCA does to your brain is it triggers you. Right? If you think about your brain, you have your brainstem, which is sort of the part that regulates your normal body and your autonomous system. Then you have your limbic system, which is what we're going to be talking about here, which is the emotional part of your brain. It's what we have in common with animals, or especially higher animals like mammals. And then we have our neocortex, which is our thinking human brain that's beyond that. But in the limbic system is this little thing called the amygdala. Right? And the amygdala's job is essentially to look for potential danger. Right? So the amygdala is constantly scanning the environment to see, is there anything going on? And when it triggers, there's about 1,400 chemicals that get released into your system. The sympathetic nervous system gets activated, and essentially you're preparing yourself for what you might know as a fight or flight response. Right? But it's actually not quite as simple as fight or flight. It just nicely rhymes. What typically happens when your amygdala gets activated is you start with freeze. Right? If you think about a little animal, right? Suddenly you've seen a big tiger. First thing you do is stop. Right? And you stop everything. Right? And then you think, can I run away? Right? Am I fast enough to run away? Have you seen me already? Can I run away? And if you realize you can't run away, then you go, okay, cool. Can I fight this? Right? And this is why those chemicals actually make blood good for your arms, go for your arms and legs, and away from the brain, which doesn't make for very good thinking, right? So that you can prepare to fight. And if you can't do that, there's a sort of friend response, which is not really friend. It's actually more of a deferral. It's a coping with the situation, making the best out of something that's actually not feeling good at all, right? And then you can get your amygdala release afterwards, where you're actually relaxed again and open to new things. There's also these stages of grief that you might have heard about from Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. They're very similar, right? You start with shock, then you go into denial. You don't want to believe it's quite true. You go into anger, depression, bargaining, and eventually acceptance. On a personal note, you find this in a certain numbness you might have been feeling over the last couple of weeks, where you're just like blank, right? Or beginning to delude yourself and saying, hey, when I get back to the office, it's going to be okay again. As soon as it's going to go back to normal, right? You might even see some people are blaming, right? You see a lot of the conspiracy nuts in particular pointing fingers and saying Bill Gates or this or that or the UN or the WHO or somebody did this or China did this, right? So there's this blaming thing going on. And then there's a bit of a surrendering when you just kind of give up, right? And at that point, when you do that, then a new self can actually begin to emerge, right? As you're looking at yourself now saying, who do I want to be? Right? This can now come in and it's beginning to normalize. And on a societal level, which is essentially just an accumulation of the state of individuals, you see the same thing. We've seen in action when you see this businesses as well as governments. What you've seen in action, you've seen belittling, oh, this is nothing, we don't have to worry about this, right? To then this war against, right, where suddenly everything gets activated and the sirens are going, right? And then once you move out of that, which is beginning to happen, and Sandra was just sharing with me, it's happening in Serbia now, it's happening in Germany, this weird compromise situation, right? You're not quite, it's not okay yet, but you're beginning to open stores again. You're beginning to figure out how can we deal with this, right? And as we begin to normalize there, there's actually emerging, coming up and a new normal beginning to form. And the important part here is that in this first part, when your amygdala is activated, you're in contraction mode, right? You're pulling together, you're tightening up, you're seeing what's is true, and you're discarding the rest, right? And when you're open and your amygdala is released, you're actually expansive in your thinking. Now, this model has had a lot of, especially the stages of grief, has had a lot of criticism because it seems so simple, like a little left to right linear progression, which it isn't, right? It's really more like you'll probably spend a lot of time here initially, eventually move over this way and slowly this way, and eventually, hopefully, will be somewhere over here. But you'll still have pretty much all of those feelings throughout the day, as you're dealing with it, as you're watching the news, as you're hearing news about your business or for customers, right? You're going to still go back and forth a little bit between these different stages. And the idea is to see how can you keep moving so that you spend more time in the later stages than in the early stages of this. Now, why is this important? Because it has to do with who you want to be as a leader right now, right? Because it's really the foundation, because when you're acting from contraction, you're not making good decisions. As I mentioned earlier, when the amygdala is activated, there's little blood in the brain. And we do need blood in the brain to make good decisions and think. Right? And so you're going to likely be more reactive. And you've seen that maybe with your colleagues who are running into doing and making and happening, right? And this is part of the reason for this gap. If you think about leadership, there's sort of like that awareness part, like what do I know about? What can I see in the world? And then there's responsibility, like what do you actually take action on? Right? And if those are two in balance, you can create meaningful outcomes, things that are meaningful to you and meaningful to the world. Now, if you're aware of things, but you're not taking responsibility, right? It's playing small. And we might have done that in the past already, but now, especially in the situation, we have new awareness. We know more, we see more. Not to act on it is not going to feel right? And you're going to actually, when you play small, end up being depressed and finding ways to justify for yourself why you shouldn't do more, and eventually go into a more and more constrictive function. On the other hand, we have people that are taking on more and more responsibility without working on their awareness, without expanding their mindset and starting to think in new ways, and that will surely lead to you burning out. So think about your old self as probably somewhere here, with some awareness, some responsibility, and you created outcomes and everything is nice and dandy. Now, of course, with the situation, you either have been taking on a lot more responsibility suddenly, right, and you're starting to feel really, really stretched at the moment, or you're just seeing way more of what really should be happening in your company, in your country, in your neighborhood, maybe even with yourself, but you're not acting up on it yet. You're not acting on that yet. You're not taking responsibility for it. Right? And ideally, you want to go shift in both directions and really expand both your mindset, who you are as a leader, who you are as a person, and the responsibility you consequently take and the things that you can create in this world. I mentioned already this growth mindset. This is one of the key things. Right? Most of you, including myself, in the kind of education system we grew up in, most of us were trained into a fixed mindset. Right? There's this idea that you either can do something, you're good at it, or you're not. And if you're not, you better not even try, right? Or when you try something and it doesn't work and you're frustrated, you just give up, right? And you don't like to be challenged, you don't like to be pushed. You want to know that, when you do fail, when you do create something that doesn't work out, you generally take that as a self-worth problem and actually tell yourself that you're not good enough and you're not smart enough and you're not whatever enough, right? And so you also want people to tell you that you're smart. And you want to know that you know, right? Versus a growth mindset is really about knowing that we're all in motion. Like nobody's perfect. You can't be perfect. There's never been a you. Nobody's ever been you before. So there's also no right way of being you. Right? There's just you learning more, trying out more, challenging yourself, learning more when you fail, right? And really looking at how can you keep evolving yourself, right? So that you don't say, hey, I can't do this, but you might say, I'm a beginner at this. I'm still learning how to do this. Right now, we have a lot of people who are beginners at things, right? Like just think about the remote working. I talked to a company the other day that I was going to do a keynote at, and they, a couple of weeks before this happened, I said, we can do this virtually too if you want. And they said, yeah, that'd be great. But from the 3,500 people who work here, 20 of them know how to use Skype right now. So lots of learning going on. And if you think that you can't do it and you're stupid, you're not even going to turn on Zoom. Right? So we have to try. We've all been pushed into a bit of a growth mindset now because we need to learn. Right? When you're learning, it's easy that when you don't know something in particular, it's easy to not feel confident. Right? But if you think about confidence, and this is a bit what I want to help you with today, to really gain your confidence again. Confidence comes from Latin confidere, which means to have faith with. Right? So what do you have faith with? Right? If you have a faith with your bank account and your title and your job and your existing business, that might have gone away. Right? So where do you take confidence now? Right? And you have to create it either from within or, trust universe. Right? But in between, you really have nothing to hold on to. Right? So it's really important to figure out how can you trust yourself, right? How can you be in accountability with yourself and integrity with yourself so that at least you can trust that. And then you can try and test things, right? Because it's just about taking small steps, testing things, experimenting so that you can create more confidence again in your leadership, right? Because none of us have a clue what the future looks like. And I work with a lot of futurists and none of them know what the future looks like. We have scenarios, right? And you can test for that. And that testing and the doing of the testing, that actually will give you confidence again. The reason it's important too is because especially if you're a leader, who you are actually immediately reflects back on your team. Right? There's this concept of mirror neurons, which means that when you're around somebody, actually, if you see something, they've done research on that, you actually go through some of the same motions in your brain as if you were actually experiencing it. Right? And so if you come in as a leader and you're struggling with your confidence and you're struggling because you've a fixed mindset and you think you should know, but you don't, the animal part of your team is going to feel that, right? And it's going to erode their psychological safety. And I've talked about psychological safety before in our talk as well. Psychological safety is the key differentiator for any high-performing team. This is one of the studies that Google did, Project Aristotle. You might have heard about that. If you look for rework psychological safety, you'll find the documentation on it. But Google looked at what's the most important thing that sets a team apart that actually performs. And it's psychological safety, meaning the people that are in the team feel like they can be themselves. They can show up as who they are. They don't have to hide. They don't have to pretend. They don't have to, lie. They don't have to show up with a nice face when they don't have it. But they can simply be themselves. And this is your primary job as a leader, is to create that, because then you can hold your team accountable. Right? When we think about hold accountable, we usually think about that second part, the accountable part. But it starts with holding. Right? If I want to have performance from a team, the first thing I have to do is to create that psychological safety. I have to hold them. I have to give them the space in which they can perform. And how do you hold people? Right? You care deeply, start there, to really actually care about them as humans and not just as the people who perform your job duties. Right? But it's people that actually have lives, that have parents, that have children, that have things going on for them. So to show care will deeply, deeply increase their psychological safety. Giving others the stage, right? Allowing others to shine, right? Power like love grows when you give it away. So the more you give your team the stage and let them shine, the more they're going to trust in you as a leader. Of course, when they are on stage, listen, right? To listen intently with full attention. Even if you think it's crap what they're saying, give them the courtesy and the respect to listen to them while they're talking. Right? And by the way, I will send you a follow-up as well with some more deeper content to these particular pieces, because hold accountable is such an important concept here. And you will get the slides in general. The other thing you can do is actually share. Right? Talk about your feelings, share your vulnerability. And it doesn't mean that you're going to have a freak out in front of your team, but it means be honest and actually sharing your process. Right? But because by sharing your process, by sharing with them how you're dealing with fear, you're actually allowing them, you're modeling for them new ways of how they can deal with their fears or with issues. Right? And that requires you to be vulnerable and authentic. And there is really no courage without vulnerability. Can't say that often enough. We think of vulnerability as this weak thing, as something we shouldn't be, especially if you have, share the gender that I have. As men, we're told not to show feelings, not to be vulnerable, right? But actually the opposite is true. If you talk to soldiers, if you talk to people that are actually in real life death situations, they have fear, right? It's the ability to overcome fear that is important, not the absence of fear. Courage is not the absence of fear. It's just the ability to overcome it again and again. And by demonstrating that, you can also encourage your team to do more of it. That requires giving them permission. We all want to be told it's okay, you can try this. So give permission to people. That requires you to trust them, right? Because you give permission to them to do something. So they want to feel like you actually trust them to get it done. And you have to make it safe to fail because they might fall on their face. Right? So how do you respond when they're falling on their face? Right? Nobody likes to be punished. So how can you be kind to them in this process? And giving a feed forward, meaning afterwards telling them not what they did wrong and how they're stupid and how they did this all bad, but instead of that saying, okay, cool, what worked for you here, what didn't work for you here, how would you do this next time? Right? Orienting them on the future and really having them be the ones answering that rather than you telling them. And finally, acknowledging them. Right? And acknowledging often, we don't get acknowledged much in our daily lives as adults. Right? As a kid, you're constantly acknowledged for putting on pants on, putting on shoes on, going to school alone, all that stuff. You constantly get a good job, good job, good job. And then that stops once you go to school. You get the occasional good grade, the occasional prize, maybe later on the occasional promotion, or here and there, your boss gives you a go boy, great job. But we don't do it often, and especially if we don't celebrate the process. Right? When we talk about how we acknowledge seeing someone for how they've been showing up, then we also encourage them to do more of that. The other side, as I said, we talk about accountable more, but even there's some deficits here, right? And the first thing is to actually give people a clear purpose and focus. Right? Your job as a leader is to make sure that your people know what they're expected, what's expected of them, and what they're here to do. Right? That requires some constraints. Right? Constraints actually encourage and are required for creativity. Right? You want to say, hey, within these boundaries, do something, right? So that they also know where it's safe. Right? That requires clear roles, right? To know that who's doing what and who's on first. And it requires real clear agreement structures. Right? A lot of people don't really have that, even as adults. I'm often surprised with how many people are working in the corporate world even, who don't know how to make a clear agreement with someone. They might say, hey, can you get this done for me? Great, thanks. Right? Or they don't say, hey, I need this done by then. It's going to look like this when it's done. And here's, I want to be informed when it's done. Right? And to be really clear on how we deal with agreements and also how we deal with agreements when they're broken. Right? Because if we just ignore them, that typically festers and ultimately erodes your culture. The first of those agreements is time. Right? I'm usually, for 20 years I lived in America and was constantly told that I'm so German because I'm such a stickler for time. But time is really the first agreement of like how you do anything is how you do everything. If you're constantly late or people are constantly late, there's a mushiness in the agreement structures, and you will notice that everywhere else as well. And that is required for dependability. Right? We want to know that we can rely on each other and that we have clear conditions of fulfillment. I know what it looks like when it's done, and I can rely on people to get it done. And I need to measure that. Right? That's what metrics are for. And they often get confused. Right? We oftentimes, especially in companies for the last years, they've been focusing so much on the metrics that they've lost the forest for the trees. Right? And if you just focus on financial metrics, you're actually eroding the quality of your product or service, according to a study by McKinsey. So metrics are just there to give you an indication, are you moving in the right direction? And then there's feedback, the other side of things here. Everything is feedback, right? Water is wet, rocks are hard, and your job as a leader to be clear on what's okay and what's not okay, and really to show people consequence of their behaviors. Right? It's less about punishment. I already said nobody likes to be punished. It's really more about making clear that when you do this, this happens. Right? Because understanding that shows you consequence. Right? And without consequence, I don't know if I did okay. Right? So there has to be that closed feedback. But as I said, I'll send you more on this hold accountable because it's such a key tool for how you're going to manage your team. So once you know all that, where do you go? Well, the first question you're asking yourself as a leader, probably, and have been asking yourself, is how do I step into crisis and create what's most needed now? Right? Because we first start with triage. Right? The second part now is to say, how am I preparing to create for the world afterwards? Right? Because this is going to go, not be over, but change. Right? There's no normal that we can go back to, but we have to now build the new normal. Right? And so the two questions: what can I do right now? What can I do to set myself up for the post-pandemic world? And we like to use this concept called Connect, Scan, Focus, Act. It's actually a super useful tool you can use for pretty much anything, everything from your personal reflection on yourself to how you relate in relationships, all the way to future building. And really it starts with just connecting to what's there, what's here, what's right now, scanning for all the pertinent information, focusing on where you have leverage, and actually acting on it. If I take this into your current situation, this first step of connecting is take stock of what you have. Right? It's not all lost. Right? Even though this moment and transformational moments when suddenly our future visions go away, we're feeling it's all over, but take a stock of what you have. Right? Then look at what are all the different trend lines and what are some possible scenarios of how this could go. Right? This is also an important shift because in the past, we've generally assumed one future. Right? We said, here's our track, here's a 5-year plan or a 3-year plan or a 1-year plan, and it's going to go like this. Right? And maybe there's a low, medium, high expectation kind of variation in there, but it was essentially a scenario because we assumed a relatively stable world. Now it makes sense to actually have multiple scenarios for how things could go very differently. And ideally, they're very different scenarios so that you can see which way things are actually moving. Then identify needs and opportunities for these different scenarios. What's going to be needed, right, for your customers? And finally, test and act with confidence, right? To continue to get out of shock and denial and this contraction and actually beginning to explore, beginning to move again, beginning to test some things and see would this even work going forward. We're going to give you this creation canvas as part of the slides. This is one of the tools we use. Where you see above, we have the resources and productive capacity and the existing customer base. This is part of what do I have. Right, to really look at what do I have in terms of my team, my assets, my technology. I might have a brand, I might have investments, I might have markets. I have a lot of that capacity already. And then I have an existing customer base and network, right? Who do I know? Which customers do I have that are key? Right? Who's already in my field in terms of experts and support? And so once you've connected to that, then you look into, okay, what are some of the alternative futures, right? You can do this exercise with your team so that you can actually lots of voices in the room, very helpful. And then from there, you can identify opportunities and figure out what you need to learn and what you need to do next. So if I look at that from, just in this exercise here, so when you connect to what you already have, right? As I said, you have resources and productive capacities, you have existing customer base and people that want to support you and need your support, right? You have the ability to learn and continue to evolve. Right? You have your existing relationships and the brain trust of your employee base. Right now, one of the things that I mentioned at the beginning is innovation is moving from these specialty edge departments into everywhere. Right? So it's now also key to give your people the tools so that they can innovate everywhere and you can bring their genius and their intelligence into the room. Right? Then your ability to identify and act on opportunity in the first place, and your ability to anticipate possible futures. Right? So this is all things that you already have that are going for you and supporting you. And now you can look at what else is out there, right? And these things actually haven't changed that much. While COVID has been this huge topic for the last few months, the rest of these things are still true. And actually maybe even more true, like infrastructure and supply chains. That has become an additional huge important focus at the moment because we're looking at supply chains and infrastructure and realizing how important they actually are. Right? And we have a shifting workforce, right? Even more so now with this whole virtual thing, but it's also triggered a lot of personal evolution for people, right? And a lot of people are sitting at home going, why do I actually have this job? And what am I doing? And why do I want to go back to this? Right? So you have a shifting workforce, shifting values. They might want to be more flexible. They might want to have more innovation capacity. So there's also a shift that's happening with your employees here. AI and other technologies have continued to advance and have actually gotten a boost for this current situation because of all this additional focus on evolution. And we have societal changes in new values, right? From how we're now going to live in a world of distancing. Right? Sandra and I were just talking about, how do you go to a bar with a mouth thing on? Right? It doesn't make sense. Right? How do you go to a restaurant? How do we connect to people anymore? Right? A lot of companies are already looking at completely new models of offering their services, because the original ways don't work anymore. We have continued global shifts and economic shifts, right, in terms of politics and things that are out there. You've seen the rise of China already, and the big play it's making, and especially in the situation where America is pretty much in self-destroy mode right now in its current society. So we'll see what happens there, and we'll see if China and some of the other Asian countries will actually be able to fill that gap. Right, and obviously Europe, and also especially countries in Europe like yours, are going to be more and more important, because now innovation can indeed come from everywhere, and we have even more geo-arbitrage through this virtual work. And of course, climate has not gone away. There was a beautiful graph I saw the other day when two people are looking at this curve saying, oh, I can't wait for this be over. And right behind them was this next curve of climate change. I don't know if you're following the Arctic, but ice is more gone than ever before. We're already in Germany. I can tell we've been having a drought already. California is heading for another big drought. So there's some serious climate things that have not gone away, and the contrary are actually going to get worse in the next couple of years. So this is also all happening. But I'm kind of interested in what you guys are seeing. We have a little bit of time. Sandra, does it still make sense? Do we want to play with the audience a little bit? I don't know if we can rope them in to answer questions, or should we wait until the Q&A for this? What do you think?
Do you hear me now?
I hear you, yes.
Okay. If we can use the chat, then we can do it now. Okay. And type in the chat box.
Cool. And let's do that. I would suggest take a moment and actually, let me see if I can see the chat here. Take a moment and put in the chat whatever you see is happening in the moment for you. And then we'll see what we get there, and then we can build a decision from there. See polarization everywhere. Absolutely, that's absolutely happening. Actually, really, all of any inequalities we've had before are amplified in this situation. Rich and poor, we see the gender gap, for example, right? Like, for example, most people who are most affected by this crisis at the moment are women. So there's a lot happening there, where we actually see these inequalities, right? And we've seen also that most of the system relevant jobs, 70% of those are done by women as well. So there's a bit of a gender gap that's closing. We see polarization in poor and rich, right? We see, while we, for the most part, have sort of first world problems around our internet connection at home, I have a friend who works in the slums in the Philippines, and it's a very, very different picture there. Or other friends of mine in India who are close to the slums there, who are seeing, how this thing is really splitting people. And, in this whole amygdala activation state, remember how I talked about anger and blaming? One of the ways in which that shows is actually polarization. Right? We see that, for example, in America to an extreme, right, where we even have armed people walking into government buildings to demonstrate against, the lockdown and the shelter-in-place regulations. So that's happening all over the place. Dejana had a good point here as well. There's a lot of industries where we're not even sure if they're going to recover. Right? I mean, if you look at the oil situation, just the other day, you could actually get paid to take on oil. Right? And so there's also a lot of movement around not even supporting oil industries anymore and not bailing them out. Right? And we also see a lot of companies that were built on physical models that are absolutely struggling. Right? And you say you're a startup here, but a friend of mine actually just said the other day, we're all startups again now, right? Because really, at this point, everything is in question. And to some extent, startups, while they're struggling, of course, like everybody else, don't have necessarily the cash or the bandwidth to deal with this as well. In some ways, they're actually better positioned because they are smaller and they're more able to pivot, right? And so really, especially if you're a startup, think about, you go back to your business model and really think about, how does this change now? What is it that people need now? And how can we take what we have as an idea and what we've been working on making happen, right? How can we adjust that to the current situation? Right? Because your original idea might not work anymore. And so it's super important to be flexible here and act like a startup, actually. So a lot of big companies are learning from you, Dejan. So in that sense, it's a good idea to actually really use your flexibility and double down on that. But you're right. I mean, some of the areas and industries will no longer be around and will also significantly change. Even simple things like where we get our food. Right? For years, we've talked about local resilience and having, for example, vegetable gardens inside of cities, right, with improved growing techniques and hydroponics, etc. Those things are now actually way more feasible than they have been in the past because we see the necessity for those. Cool. So looks like that's sort of it for questions. And in this case, I'll just keep going, and then we'll just leave more room for questions because that's ultimately what's most important, right? So that you get to bring yourself into this. And really what the whole point of this transformation is when everything's in the air, it's much, much easier to rearrange, right? I mean, at the moment, we have so many opportunities where people are willing to make changes that even half a year ago, they wouldn't have been able to do. But I just talked to one of my clients earlier, and they just hired their first virtual student, in the sense of a student worker for their company. And half a year ago, if I told them that they'd interview and hire someone purely virtually, they would have laughed at me. They would have laughed me out of the room and said, that's never going to happen. Right? And now it's just normal. So it's a really great time to rearrange and look at, what's happening. I'm not going to go too deep into these things. These are just kind of shifts we see for afterwards. But as I said, I'll send you the deck, and then you can have take a look at those in your own time. And if you have questions, obviously we're around to answer them as well. So not going to go too deep into this. This is kind of what we're doing as well. Similar to ICT Hub, we're also helping people with future building and cultures, and specifically focusing on the leadership development, because mindset right now, if I want to have new outcomes, I need new behaviors. If I want new behaviors, I ultimately need to start with a new mindset. Right? And so you're not alone in this. You have ICT Hub available to you. We are here to support you. And ultimately, the key thing is keep calm and create future. Right? It's really focus on your own neurology, focus on your well-being, mental health. Those kind of things have become more important than ever before. Cool. So in that case, I want to actually open it up to questions, and I see we have one already, which is awesome. Greatest industry changes in the pandemic. Well, maybe I do go back to the slide for a moment here. I think in terms of industry, I think we're, on the one hand, going to be focusing way more on infrastructure. Right? We've had a very celebrity-focused and excitement-focused world, and with cool little gimmicks and cool little new apps and things. I think a lot of focus is actually going to be shifting back to the roots, right? And really looking at how can we create sustainable infrastructures and supply chains for our world, right? So that we ensure that we are actually resilient. I do think that we're going to see a lot of real business, right? Versus think about back in the day, there's a lot of let's invent something and make people addicted to it. And as long as they click on it 5 times every day, we have a business. Those kind of models, I think they're going to go out of fashion very quickly. I think we're going to really see things that are meaningful. Right? I think a lot of times, if you think about right now in this situation, one of my hippie friends joked about it, and you probably saw that meme as well, how essentially COVID is Mother Nature sending us to our rooms to think about what we did. And so in some ways, I think it's really about that, right? And a lot of people have had personal reflections that they've seen around who they are and what they're doing, and are actually concerned with more important things now. So I think we'll see a lot of focus on industries that support meaning, right? Industries that support meaningful experiences, meaningful gatherings, meaningful collaboration, right? Those kind of industries will definitely rise. I think we'll get over some of our ego industries, the me, look how great I am industries, with people that supported people in their own hubris. So I do think that we're going to go over that. And other than that, I think it's really any industry can survive if it's actually taking care of people's needs. Right? I think some of them have to really seriously consider how they're doing things and what they're offering. Right? Even if you think about the acceleration of trends that have already been there, like if you look at mobility, right? The majority of people don't want to own cars anymore, right? And this has been coming for years, right? And right now, suddenly, where everybody's actually staying at home, this is becoming even clearer, right? And so if your business is, we make the best driving machine, who wants a driving machine in the future? Right? There's going to be a small, very niche group of people that are still going to enjoy that for a hobby, right? But in terms of a daily business, it's people want transportation. They want safe transportation, right? They don't want frills around their car. They don't even ever own a car because it's fixed cost, right? Another thing that comes in this situation is, as everybody is clamping down in the contraction, they're also looking at, what am I spending my money on, right? What am I spending money on that's actually meaningful to me, right? And so you'll see online, obviously anything online will go up, right? Online accessibility will go up. Those kind of things will go up. And on the other hand, infrastructure that allows that to happen. But we'll also see, for example, one of the things that typically happens after a crisis is that people will focus on automation even more. Right? So anything that is sort of semi-automated right now, in all likelihood, in the next 12 months, we'll have way more innovation around automation. Robotics is rising. I just saw this one startup that I've been watching in San Francisco. They deliver food by robot. It's a cute little thing that drives through Berkeley and brings you your lunch. Those kind of things, right? And of course, if you extrapolate from there, robotics in medicine, robotics in industry, robotics in telepresence, right? This whole, if you guys have seen the movie Surrogates, it's a nice little view into our future where people are actually sitting at home and they have robots going out there doing their bidding in the world outside. Right? So we'll have those kind of things. You'll see a lot of anything with automation or robotics will probably advance as well. Biochemistry, health, right? And mental health and wellness industry in general has also gotten a huge burst in these couple of days because people are realizing how important mental health really is.
Let me just unmute myself. I have a question regarding leadership needed for innovation. So we were all aware of the fact that even before COVID-19 pandemic and everything, there was a lot of struggling with inadequate leadership when it comes to innovation. So we lacked as leader either vision or communicating that vision, or courage, more of entrepreneurial spirit and patience when it comes to innovation. Do you see any major changes there? How do we not let this crisis go to waste in terms of things there?
Well, I think it's a beautiful opening. I mean, even before this, we were becoming aware that the normal kind of command and control leadership wasn't actually working, right? Because we've been accelerating everything, right? And in the time of Henry Ford, it worked when you sell one car per generation. You have a very clear purpose, simple purpose, doesn't change much, vision doesn't change much. We build cars, that's what we do. Right? And then you can focus on making the machine more and more and more and more efficient. Right? Now, of course, we're realizing that making things just more efficient doesn't make them resilient necessarily. Right? So we need to build different kinds of organizations to begin with, but specifically also as leaders. Right? We also now get to be different. Right? You saw my hold accountable pitch earlier here. Right? And it's really that balance of being integrated in, let's call them, for lack of better terms, masculine and feminine properties, right? That each of us have available to us. Right? And a lot of the men that I know who are leaders who in the past actually wanted to shift out of being the guy who always is the guy who makes decisions and who knows everything, right? Because that's how we've promoted people, right? If you were the smartest kid in the room, you got the PhD, you kept going up in the organizational chain and became the boss, right? And everybody looks at you and says, boss, what should I do? Right? And you were always the one who had to have the answers and had to make the decisions and tell people what to do. But I know a lot of leaders have actually struggled with that because they're like, I don't know either. I want my team to come up with solutions with me, but I can't say that to them because they lose respect. Right? Now it's a great time to say, you know what? Nobody knows. It's okay not to know. Right? You don't have to be the smartest guy in the room. Hopefully you're not the smartest guy in the room, actually. Right? Because then you have yourself a really shitty room if you're the smartest guy in there. Right? So really to say, as a leader, this is your opportunity now to step out of the pretending to have to know and be the guy that does it all, into managing emergence, right? Into facilitating emergence to happen, because we need to now have the entire organization be leaders, right? And really have more people step up in their own environment. I said earlier how innovation is not just for the few anymore. It's really about every job, because every job is in question. Every process is in question right now, right? So you also need people to take leadership there. And it's really that mindset shift into sort of an entrepreneurial leadership, in the sense of, this is my company, this is my job, I'm going to do the best I can here, right? And so in order for that to happen, we need to allow them to do that, right? This was a lot of the pieces that I talked about under the hold piece of, giving people permission, of letting them fail, of trusting them to try something, and running lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of experiments. Right now, it's not about you sitting in a room, coming up with a master plan and then telling everybody where to go. Right now, it's just bring your whole team and say, hey, what do you guys see? What should we try out? All right, and come up with 1,000 little experiments that we can run to know where we're at and what's happening. Right? But for that, you get to actually resolve yourself and actually finally step away from the I need to be the hero kind of thing, because we all get to be heroes now. Right? And I think from the leadership style, this is the opportunity, as I said, especially for a lot of men that I know who've been trapped in that role, right, and have been trapped in that I have to be the boss role, into, wow, my job is to hold my family together. Right? My job is to support my team. My job is to create and inspire and support creativity from everybody. Right? So it's a very different kind of leader, because again, it's a little bit more like a startup leader, entrepreneur, than a CEO. Right? Because we're all startups now. We all need to test and experiment and figure out how to pivot. Right? It's not about taking the resources you already have and making it more efficient.
And do you think in those trials and errors and lessons are learned in the progress, are leaders going to be braver in terms of moving more from some core innovation or improvements on existing business models that are dying either way, to something that's more of augmented innovation, that some like to call it? Or we have a question on how we're going to capture those new market opportunities with what we already have. Do you see us more going to that horizon 2 or 3 innovation, which are more braver and more stepping out of something that's comfort zone, and maybe how to step in there with what we have now?
Yeah. Well, and it's, as you like to say in innovation, yes, and I think it's a key that it's not an either or. Right, you still have your existing business to take care of. You still have financial obligations to fulfill. You still have existing processes that are and assets and things that are there. Right, and the second thing is, and everything is new. Right, and so I think it's both and, in the sense of innovation now occurring on all levels, on all horizons. Horizon 3 of running some experiments for what could the world look like after. Right, and this is where I was mentioning future scenarios earlier. Right, to even actually begin to innovate future scenarios even for Horizon 3, to see what could that even look like, right? And Horizon 2 and Horizon 1 is that more immediate requirements, and even actually in Horizon 0 in your core business, there's now much more innovation that's required. But in terms of the limited capabilities, I think here the biggest opportunity is relationship. Right? Because in the end, even when you think about startups that I've known who had no actual product and just had a paper prototype and walked up to people and connected with people, asked them what their needs, worked with them, and through their paper prototype, what they did was build customer relations. Right? And afterwards, when they had an actual functioning product, they had a whole bunch of people who wanted to play. Right? And I think it's similar situation now. The key thing, and I know it sounds kind of stupid when I'm talking to innovation people, but customer focus, right, is now more and hugely important than ever before. Right now, it's not about you and your company and your assets and your financial statements and your stuff. Right now, make your priority your customers and their lives and what's changing for them, what's happening in their world. How can you now support them? How can you support them next year? Right? These are the questions to really focus on, and building those relationships with whatever crappy MVP you can muster up with whatever resources you have at the moment. Right? It's actually more important that you build that relationship and that they feel like you have people that you actually care about them, than that you deliver them the perfect product. Right? I mean, we've seen this in innovation. Think about how many apps you've probably used yourself. They were kind of buggy and kind of crappy, but everything around it was so awesome, and the relationship with these people was so awesome that you kind of dealt with it, and you kept getting better. And as long as it's getting better, it's awesome, and you keep using it. Right? But that's a relationship that's at the core of this. Right? And I think this is really your opportunity to show your customers, and starting with your employees, right? Because customer focus starts with employee focus. Right now, as a leader, focus on your people, focus on making them feel safe and letting them know that you'll be there for them and that you're in this together, and have them then focus on how can you serve the people around you. Right? Because then this is exactly that whole, when there's a beautiful saying, I think was it Plato, about how necessity is the mother of invention, right? It is, we have limited capabilities right now, but in some ways it's actually not bad, right? We've seen, for example, startups, when they're over-financed, they don't do as well as the ones that are scrappily financed, right? That are really purposely mission-driven and customer-driven. Right? And so it's not the money, it's not the, those kind of things. Of course, money is important, flow is important, and especially I'm talking to a lot of finance people because they're sort of at the helm of this change right now, because they're the ones who have the spigot of money, right? And so finance teams, in a way, are setting strategy for the company in many ways right now by figuring out what they're making liquid and what they're not, But beyond that, you, no matter where you are, always have the ability to reach out to your customers and connect.
You gave me a nice introduction to my next question. I was always wondering really how much the situation is going to improve corporate innovation. Even without this crisis, we are aware of that corporate innovation is in constant crisis, kind of, because for a bunch of reasons, whether they're structural, organizational, cultural, or whatever, things are not working. A lot of initiatives are failing, transformational efforts. I just read this morning a data that even when you hire an external innovation consultant, you push for efforts that in 70% fail. You push to build things that you kill afterwards instead of doing what you just said in terms of really focusing on the customer and really investing on small bets and testing and experimenting and learning from that, and not even getting to the market something that's not needed. Do you think we will ever get any wiser and better at corporate innovation from that corporate side of perspective?
Well, they do say innovate or die, so I think that is even truer now. And I think it's a little bit like reading. Back in the day, people didn't need to read, right? And only a few people were ones who could read. Right, and they would learn new stuff, and they would bring in information from other countries or other places and share it with the rest of the tribe. Right? And eventually we realized it would be really good if everybody could read. And now we actually at least train people to read. Right? And I think with innovation, it's a little bit like that, where corporate innovation has been this sort of like at the edge, right? Constantly dealing with this stupid dualism that's been driving me nuts around, oh, here's core business and here's innovation. We either do this or we do that. Right, and if we do this, then this is right, then this must be wrong. And if this is right, then this must be wrong. Right, and there's a constant dualism between these two, and instead of understanding that in the end, a business is a collection of processes, and then various stages of maturity. Right, and you can continue to innovate and continue to also have things that are stable. Right, this is a sort of inherent paradox, right? Like as I said earlier, big organization, the job is to make the resources that you have efficient, right? And in a startup, you have no resources and you figure out how to do what you can with what you have. And now we get to create this hybrid, truly hybrid, right? People have talked about ambidextrous organizations, similar models, but I think it's beyond that, even in the sense that innovation is the new writing. Right? We need to teach all of employees to write right now. Right? Because every job is in question. There's so much waste and so much stupid bureaucracy that's grown over the years, in those fat years that we've made everything more important, and we had the time to focus on this tiny little % of risk that could potentially happen, that actually never happens, and spend a ton of resources building policies and procedures and structures and systems around that, when that kind of stuff is going to be considered waste. Right? And now really it's about everybody gets to innovate, and it's not about like, we've had this conversation as well about really baking innovation into DNA, into how you do things. Right? Like in basic, if you think about in basic ontological coaching, they talk about results, behaviors, and mindset. Right? Where we all need new results now, we need new outcomes, we need existing businesses that are shifting. We need new businesses, right? We need that. We have a pile of innovation tools. I mean, there's no lack of innovation tools. I mean, you can find anything you want for free online, Bismo, Canvas, Lean, tons of stuff, right? The tools are there. What's not there is the mindset, right? In the organization, there's still the, I do my job and that's my job. Or over there, the cool kids at the corner, they have red chairs and they have cool whiteboards and Post-its and they do innovation over there, right? And that dualism has to break, right? And I think this is really our opportunity to go ask every employee, how can you do your job differently? Create that mindset, right? That shifting from limitation to creation in their mindset is just why I started with the amygdala, right? Because if that's activated, I mean, contraction, that's not a creative mindset. Right? If I'm stressed, if I'm afraid of my job, if I'm getting yelled at by my boss for trying something, I'm not going to innovate. I'm going to shut up and play small or leave. Right? And so right now, if your company is one of those that doesn't support people innovating, you will lose your best talent, right? And you will actually lose your chance to be here tomorrow as a result of it. So for me, actually in some ways, this is our chance or innovation's chance. So if you're doing innovation in your company, this is your chance to really make clear to people, right? Coming back to that very first slide that I had here, where innovation is now at the core of what we need to do, right? At the real, it's about solving today's problems, not tomorrow's, right? And the best thing you can do is make innovation how you do things in your company.
I definitely agree that it's the right time for fast track everything that we as leaders in corporations or other like general, even smaller businesses to rethink and really focus on what's important for our customers that you said, and then for employees, and then from there really on created value that it's needed. Can you share with us a little bit more on what are you working these days? What occupies your attention in terms of research or what do you
mostly generally we've been focusing on helping companies come up with future scenarios. So really thinking about what are potential future situations, but in going into that future casting, using a lot of the tools that we've learned from our futurist friends or bringing futurists in. I'm super fascinated about that culture shift, right? And how can we create organizations of leaders? How can we create organizations where everybody there actually considers themselves a leader and has the tools to interact with other people? And at the core of that for me has always been mindset and leadership, right? And to really think about this is our chance. And as I said, right now, if you think about that, kind of looking from above, right? What's happened sort of is double, right? In a way, on the one hand, we've been looking at suddenly the planet from above, right? We've had pictures of Earth from space since 1968, but we've still kept in thinking about nations and separations and continents and things. And for the last few months, everybody has been staring at world maps, right? And so we've had sort of this overview effect of like, oh shit, we are on a planet together. And this product that I like does come all the way from China. Does it need to come from China, or can I find it in Belgrade? Maybe I can find something like this in Belgrade that's even better. Right? So there's that shift of overview there. And then there's the overview of self. Right? When you're sitting in your own room, and unless, especially if you don't have kids, you might have seen it with some of your younger employees that are, used to being out and about and partying and meeting people and mating and mating rituals and all that stuff, right? Who are suddenly sitting at home by themselves going, my own four walls. And they're getting really, really loud, right? And so suddenly you have this personal perspective on yourself, right? And so really the great opportunity that I see here at the moment is that we are actually evolving as humans in a fast track, right? And that personal perspective that usually comes from years of personal development, right? Where you actually reflect on yourself and you think about yourself and you look at yourself as a leader, right? That you've only done in sort of leadership seminars, if you've actually done any or personal development seminars outside of work. Suddenly we've all kind of been forced to do that, right? And suddenly you have these employees who've done that and how we've all done that in a way. And when you are in a moment of transformation, I like to use this example of an iron rod. Like if I have an iron rod, you hold it like this and you hammer it. it will turn into a magnet. Because what will happen is the particles get shaken up and they align themselves in the strongest electromagnetic field, in this case the Earth. And when they're all aligned, the rod will actually act like a magnet. Right? And I think it's similar to us when we have personal transformations, and normally the human transformations are, death in the family, illness, divorce, separation, job loss, those kind of things. When you have those moments, you get shaken up, right? But what happens is you actually align yourself more with who you really are and who you came here to be. And I think right now we've gone through this collective transformational moments, and we as individuals and as societies have all got shaken up a little bit. And now is a chance to really align ourselves to create a world where we are in alignment with Gaia, with the planet that we're living on, right? Where we can understand that we're part of this beautiful, very fragile ecosystem in the middle of a ginormous vacuum of space, you know what I mean? And that we really understand that it's time to do business in a new way. And all the things we've been talking about, environment, sustainability, innovation, etc., that, people like you, I know as well, have been getting bloody noses from trying to persuade people that this is really, really, really important now. Here's our opening for people to see that themselves.
I think it's the best message we could have for the ending of today's webinar. Philip, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us today. As we promised, we're going to share later on some of the materials for the participants, see with you if it's okay to share the presentation along with additional materials. Hope to see you soon in Belgrade. I hope as soon as are allowed with flying restrictions to have you and to have something physically organized for people that are eagerly waiting to see you here in Belgrade.
Same here. I can't wait. I mean, while I'm pretty used to virtual. I've been doing virtual for over 20 years due to being an expert and living around the world. But there's nothing like a good solid hug, when you actually meet someone in that animal human self to connect. So I can't wait to come and visit all of your beautiful team in Belgrade again. And, hopefully we'll have a chance to play together as well.
Yeah, really looking forward to see you soon.
Same too. Thank you so much.
Thank you again to all of our participants for your questions and for thank you words in the end here in our chat box. And looking forward to see you next Monday on our next webinar. Bye.